supply chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee out of my brand new studio, which I hope you all like. We got a bit of glare, but we're going to fix that. Anyways, my name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And I'm excited to be back here with you today. Last week, Katie Date, she was our host, and they were talking all about sustainability. So I hope you check that out. If you didn't, you can see all of our past episodes on the Let's Talk Supply Chain YouTube channel. Today, we've got an exciting episode. Audrey Ross, my trade bestie, is joining me on stage to talk all about, well, we've got some trucking things to talk about, like the future of trucking. We've got a case study with asset tracking to talk about, and so much more. Plus, you're not going to want to miss her market update because she is going to spill all the tea. I'm putting her on the spot and she doesn't know this, but she's going to spill all the tea for you today. Anyways, we couldn't do this show without our show sponsor, the Secret Society of Supply Chain. It is our membership group for everybody in supply chain. So head over there, Secret Society of Supply Chain.com, to check out the latest. If you are watching, we want to hear from you. Make sure that you put your name and where you're watching from in the comments, and we will put you on the screen because we want to say hi. Now, let's get to what's happening with Let's Talk Supply Chain currently. So we've got a couple of brand new episodes for you. This one came out last Wednesday because we have an exclusive run of podcasts that I did particularly on site at Manifest, and this was one of them. One Rail and PepsiCo Labs. Now, this is an interesting partnership. If you haven't listened to this episode, go and check it out because they are making history with this partnership. If you don't know a lot about PepsiCo Labs, she is actually going to be here. Anna is going to be here in a couple of weeks for Thoughts and Coffee to talk about what they do. But this episode will tell you all about it. So go check it out. It's episode 461, wherever you listen to the show. And we've got a brand new episode that came out on Monday, episode 462. Now, this is an extra episode. I was on Procurability just a couple of weeks ago, and now Carlos came on to Let's Talk Supply Chain to talk about Procurement Unlocked, but also we're talking about best practices in a tariff-driven world. Obviously, it's a big topic right now. Everybody's talking about tariffs. So go and check that out, episode 462, wherever you listen to the show. Now, I don't know what you're doing tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. Even if you can't join us live, I highly recommend you go and click the attend button for this event. I am going live tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern with Jeff, with Mandar from Manhattan. Now, they've both been on the show before, so if you had any questions from their podcast episodes, you definitely want to come and join us, ask all your questions. But we're going to be talking about how your forecast might be lying to you and how AI can prevent some of those costly errors. So click the attend button, even if you can't attend live. We're going to send you the link so you do not miss a minute of that episode. What else have we got going on? Oh, on Thursday, we have a virtual meetup for the Secret Society of Supply Chain. So if you're a member, sign up. If you're not a member, sign up. We're going to be doing some fun networking games, and I can't wait to see everybody on there. It's from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. We have limited seats available, so go and get your seat today. Next, we've got a brand new episode of the Blended podcast, banning non-competes, good for workers, businesses, and the economy. Now, these three women came with, and I'm going to use tea again, they came with the tea, and I learned so much from all of them. Chelsea, Kieran, and Corinne all talked about and explored non-competes, what they are, how they harm workers, especially women, underrepresented voices. They shared ideas of how organizations can build trust and employee retention. So highly recommend you go check that out. It's under blendedpledge.org under podcast, or We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Last but not least, where am I going to be? Well, April 24th and 25th, I'm going to be in New Orleans at the Break Bulk and Project Cargo Conference with JOC. I'm going to be hosting Break Bulk TV. So if you're there, come and see me. And then May 21st and 22nd, I'm going to be at Home Delivery World, and we are recording podcasts on site again. So we've got an exclusive run of podcasts that are going to be happening after home delivery as well. I know that was a lot. We had a lot to catch up on, but now it's time to bring up Audrey to the stage. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. It's a little bit cloudy here. I think you're getting some
Same.
snow.
Probably. Sounds
Oh,
about April. Sounds about April in Toronto. Yes.
how is that even happening in April? I don't even know. You just had ice. Now you got snow.
Yeah.
I don't even know how you do it.
Yeah.
All right. So for anybody who doesn't know who you are, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Audrey. I'm sitting here in, overcast, possibly snowy Toronto. I'm the immediate past president on the OWIT Toronto board, which is the Organization for Women in International Trade. So it's a great group that focuses on networking and connecting women to advance their kind of professional careers. If you're in trade facilitation, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in trade policy. So that kind of keeps me busy. And as well as I don't even want to say it, back in February when we were in New York together with Amy, we kind of decided that tariff might be the 4-letter word of 2025. So, and then that was kind of really before we even knew what was coming. So the tariffs are obviously keeping us busy. And then of course the kind of waiting to see how businesses are going to react. And we were talking about peak season yesterday with a freight forwarder, and it's just almost impossible to predict if there'll be any shipments in the next couple of weeks because a lot of people are pausing. So a lot going on. Lots to keep me busy, Sarah. I'm never bored.
Well, and I can't wait for the market update because I think you're going to have a lot to talk about. You've had a lot of emergency meetings, I think, about tariffs and what's going on, but they're really not over, right? Like the negotiations are kind of only just starting, but also there's some dates in May that are upcoming as well that are going to affect a few things. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. But before we do, we ask everybody a question on the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn every Wednesday morning. So we like to poll the community about a variety of different things. If you're not part of it, you need to be part of it because you kind of get the pulse on, how people are thinking about different topics in the industry. So let's talk about this particular post. So what fintech innovation impacts your supply chain the most? Now, this was an interesting question, and the 33 votes that we got, you can tell that it's not something that people talk a lot about and really might not know how fintech does impact your supply chain the most. So out of that 33 votes, we had 45% AI and automation. We had 27% predictive analytics, 18% blockchain, and 9% digital payments. I'm still shocked to see blockchain on the list because I feel like it left and might be making a comeback and then left again. And I'm not entirely sure where the industry is on blockchain. So if you're in the audience, I want to know, put your comments in there about how you feel about blockchain. Are we going that direction? Are we not? Is it just a buzzword? I want to know. Audrey, what did you think about this poll?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting take. I think most of us maybe finance maybe tends to be kind of a separate department, but I think for all of us in the industry, it's a big important, it has an important role that we have to tie into. But it definitely kind of speaks to what is the buzz topic right now. I do think there's a core group that, blockchain is still a thing or has the potential, and maybe some of us, I don't know, misunderstood the potential or are not tapping into it, or it's not widely available. So it seems to be kind of a steady, in the background. But for me, I selected AI and automation. I think predictive analytics is pretty huge, but I think for the day-to-day impact and how it will interact with supply chain, I feel like the kind of AI and automation piece is sort of larger on the horizon for us. So
Well, and I talk about people being in supply chain that don't really know that they're in supply chain. And I think
There's,
sort of like fintech is one of them,
yeah,
and accounting and
yeah,
finance and all of that.
yeah,
They are in supply chain, right? They
yeah,
play a crucial role. If we think about buying goods from overseas,
yeah.
a lot of that was done on original bills of lading when I was growing up in logistics. And I remember having to receive them and stamp them and doing all the things.
Yeah,
But fintech really plays a big role in us being able to buy goods and make sure that obviously the seller gets paid, the buyer gets its goods in quality, delivery, and all that kind of stuff. So it does play a big role. And we're going to be talking like blockchain really is about shared data.
yeah.
And we're going to talk about this because it's going to come up in our first article. And I'm just not sure we're there yet. But I'm going to hold off on that until we get to our first article so that we can talk about it. Just a couple of comments that we had. Joe said AI all the way. And Niles said he used hashtag doubt, but I think he's kind of referring to blockchain. I'm not entirely sure. So if you're in the audience, Niles, I want to hear from you, or go back to your comment and give us a little bit of insight into what you meant. All right, so now's the time of the show that we usually get into a market update, and I've promised
Okay.
everybody the tea, so
Okay.
no pressure, Audrey. But like, tell us what's going on. There's tariffs. There's all sorts
Gosh,
of things going on.
where to start? Yeah, I mean, let's start maybe with the logistics and shipping side of it. I'm hearing there's air capacity available. Shipments are cooling down. Related to the tariffs, of course, the time period. Unlike in the previous application of tariffs in 2018, where there was like a kind of a couple of months between the tariff announcement and the tariff application, which gave shippers time to you had
Mm,
almost, I think it was almost 3 months that you had, and you could, you knew when the vessel was leaving, you knew what date they were going to start clicking through. So like quickly loaded on vessels if you could, but also air capacity, like just jammed. It was like, get it on an airplane and get it over here before the tariff. So there's a lot of
right.
movement in air, and we're not seeing that in this period because there was only really 4 days between, or 4 or 5 days between announcement and application. So that means, and especially right now, it's a bit of a lower season as we kind of gear up for what usually would be a peak season. So air capacity seems to be available, and the pricing is really competitive at the moment. For sea shipment, we're still in the same situation with the Red Sea crisis. We did see a flurry of activity, sort of with an increase in attacks or engagement with the kind of Houthis and I think the U.S. military especially. So of course, as a pragmatic, cautious vessel carrier, you're not really going to keep, you're going
Going
to keep
through there.
diverting on that route. And
Mhm.
I've mentioned this a million times, but Lars Jensen is over on LinkedIn is really posting the key updates on that, amongst his other insights. And then otherwise, yeah, it's, capacity is available, prices are coming down. There is, along with the tariff announcements, right? There's this, we had announcements in February, March, and then last week with these reciprocal announcements directed by the US administration for imports into the US. Along with that, there's two key changes that, don't get too caught up in the tariffs if you ship things by courier and if you ship things by ocean into the US, because they are
Mhm.
changing the rules on the de minimis rule, which usually has a threshold of 800 up to US
Yeah.
$800 before customs clearance duties and tariffs are applicable. But they're changing that rule specifically to China origin goods. And that doesn't preclude if you ship, if you have China origin goods and they're sitting in Canada, they're sitting in Europe, they're sitting in
Still got
Argentina,
the
they're sitting in
origin.
Mexico, origin is the origin. So,
Yeah.
and that's what's stated on the commercial invoice. So those will be affected. And then the second announcement alongside that, we're expecting more details, I think, on April 17th is what I'm hearing, from the U.S. administration on this port fees for non-U.S. Port fees for China-made ocean vessels. So the construction of the ocean vessel being in China, which is where the majority of the global shipyards are located, and where these vessels are mainly
Right.
built, constructed, produced, and released onto the water. um, there will be a port surcharge. I think similar. I do believe the canals also charges to use the canal. Like there's a user fee. So the U.S. ports are going to charge a user fee on China-made vessels. Directly, if it's a China-made vessel, $1.5 million to pop in at Los Angeles, Charleston, Norfolk, Galveston, New York. 1.5 million on China, like made. And then the vessel carrier, let's say Hapag, Maersk, One, whoever, will be charged 500,000 to 1 million if they even own another China vessel in their fleet, not necessarily if it's stopping there. Which
how is that going to be managed, though?
I'm a little.
Like,
I
do we
think
have
it's unclear.
like the people to manage that, and then also, what if they're like stopping at different ports of call? Right? Is that like 1.5 for every stop? Because that's going to get a little bit pricey for everybody.
Yeah, so I think you
Details
see
are sketchy.
a couple of people the details of it are a little vague, which is not uncommon to the recent announcements. But you can see there's some experts, Salma Cagliano over on LinkedIn as well, who are kind of trying to track this and kind of give some clarity
and navigate it, right?
But also the risk is if you take it at just straight face value, okay. And you're asking about transshipment, like because a lot of the U.S. ships do stop. I'm going to stop at Oakland, Los Angeles. I'm going to stop at Seattle, Tacoma on the West Coast. As an example, that's $5 million for $4.5 million. So you would stop. You would not stop at multiple ports. You would now stop at one U.S. port. Which U.S. port are you going to choose? If you can only stop at one U.S. port on the West Coast, you're probably going to pick Los Angeles. Los Angeles is going to get congested. Los Angeles is going to get backed up. They don't have the capacity. So there's a lot of like worst case scenarios going around, but that is kind of what's been discussed, and we're expecting more news around kind of April 17th later next week. So
interesting. And
then there's tariffs.
And then there's tariffs, right? And then I think there's a date of like May 2nd as well. On
May 2nd is de minimis.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of dates that are coming up that you want to keep in mind. Now, I want to get to our first article, but I also saw this the other day, and I want to make sure that I share this. It's around sourcing of avocados. And so what is this number? I think it's 132 million pounds of avocados are used by Chipotle across 3,700 locations in 2024. Now, that's a lot of guac. But what they're saying is they are now going to be sourcing avocados from a variety of different ways. And so this is just a really great example of just one product out of many that Chipotle obviously is sourcing for their restaurants. And previously 85% of the company's avocados came from Mexico. Now they're looking at Colombia, Peru, Dominican Republic, Brazil, Guatemala. And what happens is these, the transportation costs from some of these places are obviously going to bring the cost of the food up as well, because they're going to have to import from different places. And not all of those places have free trade agreements that are going to help with that. So just wanted to bring that up because I think it's interesting when we talk about tariffs, just to give you an idea of what companies are thinking about and what they have to do to sort of navigate and mitigate the risk of either not being able to source the product or having heavy tariffs on those products and where they have to go for it. And also, the transportation costs, right? Yeah. What is the duties? What is the taxes? They're navigating through all of these different questions when they're looking at different countries that they have to bring in from.
Yeah. And in that specific example, Mexico, you can truck from Mexico to the US. But the countries that are listed there, the countries listed there specifically have 10% tariff now, as of last week into the US. But you have to ocean ship.
Yes, you do.
Right? You can't truck. You can't truck from Colombia. You're going to put it on the ocean. You can't truck from Brazil. You're going to put it on the ocean. So then, we're changing the volumes and capacity of the ports, of the costs. It's a different cost for ocean than it is for truck. So, to your point, the variables become endless, but also a business like Chipotle, they're not only resourcing avocados, like procurement departments and global sourcing teams are probably going to do the most work they've done all year in the next few weeks if they hadn't been doing kind of a preview because they were anticipating. If you weren't really anticipating the extent of this, then these are the weeks where it's like you have to find new factories, new sources for everything.
Yeah. Well, and think about refrigerated cargo too, right? They're going to have
Yeah.
to go in refrigerated, which actually
Yes.
takes on more energy,
More CO2,
carbon
a scope
emissions, et
3
cetera, et
to keep
cetera. So
track
there
of.
actually is,
Yeah.
a much bigger landscape when we think about the tariffs, not just the costs, but the
Mhm.
costs to
Impact and
the impact, yeah,
mhm.
globally. All right, let's get to our first article. We haven't
Yeah.
even gotten to our first
Yeah, I know.
article
Oh my
yet.
gosh.
Anyways, we'll have to get through them fairly quickly.
Yeah.
This one I wanted to bring up because I thought it was interesting. Now, one of the CEOs of one of the platforms came out and spoke about trucking of the future and it being continuous flow operation over transactional.
Yeah.
But it's predicated on companies sharing data. Now, an interesting stat that they came up with in this particular article talks about how big changes like this actually haven't happened in trucking since the 1980s, and
Wow.
they're very rare occurrences. So when we talk about all of these things needing to be in place for the future of something like trucking, we also need to keep in mind that these things take a lot of time. So the sourcing of the avocados, they don't happen overnight, and people don't just start sharing data. People are very protective of their data. And so I think it's all well and good for us to talk about how the walls have to come down. We have to share data for the future of trucking. But we need to also talk about rules and regulations and who's going to regulate that and how are we going to get people comfortable with sharing data. So I thought this was a really interesting article. I would
Mhm.
highly recommend going and reading it. Audrey, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, we're still in a time period where getting a POD is a challenge. And if it's just me, let me know because like I want to know if other people have the same problems as I do because
I
it could
can't
be a me
believe
problem.
it.
I'm the problem, it's me. But it is still a problem. So that communication or that the value adds that might be available, knowing that the truck has a smartphone, the truck could have the technology, the truck has now connectivity, but what are the potential value adds to your customer?
Yeah.
What are the use cases? And to your point, can we get some standardization in an industry that is very bits and pieces and piecemeal? So that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, so go and check that out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because, I think we've got a long way to go. I don't think it's just going to happen tomorrow. All right, our second article. Now, this is a case study that we did in partnership with BlackBerry Radar, but some of the numbers and some of the stats that are coming out of this are crazy. So, we did the case study with a couple of their clients. Three main areas that they are seeing theft is in fuel, which I was really shocked about, cargo theft, and equipment theft.
Mhm.
Now, they're saying that cargo theft is up 49%, but really the biggest threat is fuel theft because it actually costs them the most money. And then obviously we put together some stats on what happens when you do bring asset tracking into your business and being able to thwart the theft threats, but also helping with maintenance to make sure that the trucks that are on the road are valid and safe for operations, but also yard checks as well. So there's a lot of really great information on this and in this case study to go and check out. Audrey, I don't know if you had anything that sort of jumped out for you that you can share.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of the technology that's available and becoming available. And if you look at even where's that statistic that you have right there, it is streamlining loading operations and
Mhm.
eliminating manual equipment tracking tasks. Because the reality is all of this equipment, it's not like a stapler or even um, you know, uh, a keyboard. Like this stuff is much more expensive than that. So you are keeping track of like the back trailer, the truck piece, the loading equipment, all of that. And so, someone's dedicated job is to keep track of that. And usually it's manual and it's probably still in Excel. So getting people out of that position, even if you click over into that one fix and one connection, that has a huge impact on someone's day-to-day job and helps them then spend time analyzing the data that's coming through and helps them kind of reallocate
Yeah.
in maybe a more efficient way. The other thing that stood out to me that was interesting was the statistic on loading times pre-COVID, so maybe pre-2020, were at 47 minutes and now they're at 2 hours.
Yes,
And
I
you're
know,
like,
I saw that
what?
too.
Like, are we just uncaffeinated in our warehouses? Like, what are we doing over there? But it could be, again, equipment mismatches. It could be a communication gap in what was expected to load, what is being loaded. So that's an interesting kind of pain point.
Well,
That
they
they've
said
drawn
that
out.
without asset tracking, the driver has to go and do a whole bunch of stuff manually, and that's why the increase in time.
Yeah.
So, if you want to learn more about it, we have dropped it into the comments over on the Let's Talk Supply Chain side. If you're on my personal LinkedIn, I'm going to drop it in the comments right after this show ends in about 3 minutes or so. So stay tuned. I'm going to go over and drop that for you. I do want to say hi to Mike and Mr. Dennis Ford Jr. over on my personal LinkedIn. Mr. Dennis says, what impact is this going to be on rates for carriers? Well, I think that's still to be determined. I don't think anybody can really predict, but I guess it depends on how much they're going to get charged at the ports with the new charges.
Yeah, I did a rough calculation internally, and if you take 1.5 million and you divide it over an average size vessel, which is about, let's say, 12,000 TEU, which are 20-foot equivalent units, so 20-foot containers approximately, it works out to about like $125, $150 per container or per TEU unit. Right.
Okay.
So you can imagine if I'm a cargo owner and I have one 20-foot container on the vessel, I'd be charged roughly, because I was like, oh my gosh, $1.5 million. And then I was like, wait a second, like, let's do some math. Like, if I'm on a super vessel and there's 24,000 TEUs on it, like those big mega ships, like maybe I'm paying $75 handling charge. If I'm on a smaller vessel, like a 5,000 TEU, maybe I'm paying like $200. So it's going to be surcharge, kind of to the bill, I would expect, but there's definitely better experts. I'll be watching, again, someone like Lars Jensen on the April 17th, April 18th, who are talking about this and can put that math together. But roughly, if you were to do a rough calculation, you could expect it's still under $500. It's not.
Well, yeah. And
not a disaster.
If it's a console with a whole bunch of different consignees, you know, it could be anywhere from 20 to 50 bucks. Who knows? All right. Well, that was a great question. Let's get to our last article really quick, because I know on past shows we have talked about this contract going in place on the East Coast ports. They have signed it. It's a historic 6-year contract. So there's job protection, a 62% raise. But just so you guys know, when it comes to some of these contract negotiations, this one started in 2023. And was only just ratified in, I believe, March 2025. So these things take a long time, right? And they really create some disruptions and some turmoil and some uncertainty, because we just don't know where it's going to land and how it's going to affect the ports. But I am very happy that they have come together in a deal. We at least have 6 years of somewhat of peace, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think?
They usually start pre-negotiations, the just before, so we'll get to year 5.5 and then they'll start talking about, or year 5, and they'll start talking about the next round of negotiations.
Okay,
I think it's good. I think it's good for everyone likes a little bit of stability, especially in this moment. Like, we want to see some stability, especially at the ports where we've just come through disruption, 2020, disruption, 2021, disruption. So, and people made the comment, that last year was going to be, I think maybe it was Journal of Commerce made the comments, like last year was going to be the labor disruption year. 2024 was going to be all about labor, and it did not disappoint. It was. So it's nice to see this kind of come together. I'm so fascinated that there's some, still some really, really strong resistance to automation at these ports. I think, other people have made, much more insightful commentary than I have, but to not see US ports kind of take on some automation or some, kind of future forward efforts has been interesting. And so it'll, I look to learn more about, why that tactic, why that approach, and to see, in the coming years, what does that mean for global ports that have taken an automative approach. So
Right.
Fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for today. It's the fastest 30 minutes in supply chain. I can't believe we're done every single time.
Yeah.
Next week, I've got Akshay from Terminal 49 joining me as my guest, and I'm going to be coming at you live from Miami because I'm in Miami to film a TV episode, which is really exciting. But thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. Make sure you go and click on those links to get more on the articles that we spoke about. Make sure that you go and follow and connect with Audrey on LinkedIn as well, because she's got so much great insights to share. Audrey, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see everybody tomorrow for the Manhattan Live. I hope to see you there, and then we'll see you again next week for Thoughts and Coffee. Thanks, everyone.